Now, one of the more contentious designs that people like to talk about are the Ranger helmets. And I didn't even realize it was such a common thing where people really hated the lip versions of Power Ranger helmets versus the ones that didn't have any lips on it. For me, that never became a thing. I like many seasons that have lips in the helmets and many seasons that don't have lips on the helmets. I was kind of surprised when I read like various forums where so many people like, I really hate the Rangers with lips and I really love the helmets that have no lips on them. Ranger helmets are like one of those things that is really difficult to pick and choose which are your favorites, because for me, I don't really have like an ugly Ranger suit. Like even the most common ones where like everyone hates the Lost Galaxy ones because everyone always makes fun of it being Charlie Brown, or the Lightspeed Rescue suits because it kind of looks like candy. Those never really bugged me, so it's kind of hard to actually choose which 10 seasons of Rangers would be my favorite.
Time Force Rangers.
But I will begin with Time Force. I think the reason why I did enjoy the Time Force suits because, it was the very first time Power Rangers tried to do something different with the visors. Before that point, we always had Ranger helmets that just had black visors, and there was a good reason why. Because when Time Force introduced the colored visors, those are very difficult to actually do. In most cases, the stunt performers are blind because whenever they do talking dialogue, the helmets are actually not seeable. They're basically, just dummy helmets where they have to act out the scene blind. But for what they did to get around it for the action scenes was pretty cool. The designs are also reflected on each of their Zords so that, consistency is there. And of course, Time Fire was kind of like the first 6 Rangers that was much like a Red Ranger himself. So that also adds to the uniqueness. And I also really like the light pattern that it did. Most Ranger helmets don't really get to have like, extra things built in, whether functional or just cool factor.
Turbo Rangers.
This list, like I said, was really hard to pick because there's so many of the seasons I really had no problems with, and that comes to the Turbo Ranger suits. I really liked the Turbo Ranger helmets because I think it was the very first time Power Rangers actually had functionality built into the suits. Ignoring the MMPR movie for a second, the Turbo Rangers had, their lights built in, so they can actually illuminate whenever they're like in a cave or something. So it actually has a positive aspect to the Rangers that we can see. I know in universe-wise, the helmets actually have built-in HUDs and stuff that the Rangers get information from, but it was the first time we actually had some practicality to see visually for the audience. And as well, I did like that each of the helmets were based off the cars they drove, so they had like, their guardrails, their lights, and they're also the first ones to actually have the top of their helmets mimic the car's windshield shapes.
Zeo Rangers.
The next one has to go to Zeo. I did really like the theme of shapes and, ancient Egyptian elements and all that stuff. I think overall the Zeo suits were unique in general because the kind of like blending of technology and ancient Egypt was a cool concept on itself. Then you put the shapes on it. Yeah, the Zeo helmets could kind of feel more like very simplistic because unlike the other helmets, they do have the lips, but they're actually not separated in any way. It's one solid piece, which I think is what makes it more unique. And it makes the shapes of the helmet stick out even more. Although I always wondered, how does Tanya see through her visor? Because the 2 bars are kind of like right where the eyes are. So I don't really know how like the stunt performer works in the helmet, but it's got to be very distracting. Speaking of that, there's various other Power Ranger helmets that must be very difficult to see through because of the weird designs they picked.
Ninja Storm Rangers.
Now, Ninja Storm has to be on my list because, again, it brought in a really cool feature of allowing us to see the Rangers through the helmets. I really like that they integrated that into the suits, and I'm kind of surprised that rarely does it ever actually get done in other seasons. And I remember the MMPR movie wanted to do something similar, but in a more permanent way where we see the Rangers faces all the time, which I think it would have been better if they had done something similar to this concept. And in general, the Ninja Storm designs are really nice because, again, it has to reflect 3 different types of schools basically, and each one had their own unique designs with different crests. And the only thing that I kind of got disappointed with was with Cam, because his helmet's designed to actually have 2 different modes, regular mode and Super Samurai mode, he didn't really have the ability to open up his visor. In show, he has to actually turn his entire helmet off.
In-Space Rangers.
Since I love functionality of the helmets, that has to also mean I also love the in-space helmets because it gives them various power-up abilities for each of the Rangers. Now, the abilities of the in-space suits are not really explained in in-space. They make a lot more sense when you watch Mega Ranger because each of the suit abilities are based off the personalities of the users in Mega Ranger, so some of them just like don't make sense, like microchip for Zane. It's just like, huh? That doesn't really make any sense. I think Ashley's the one who likes a camera, and like that's really not her personality. But for what they do in Mega Ranger / in space, they do have cool practical features that each of the Rangers do. Like Carlos can interface with a satellite, and so he can either use it as be able to view from high ground or track certain things. So it's a positive aspect of it. And it's kind of funny though how advanced the in-space suits were when in the original concept from Mega Ranger they were just basically video game characters. So it was weird that such advanced suits existed just for playing video games.
Alien Rangers.
Now, probably the most simplistic suits on the list are the Alien Ranger helmets. I really like them. They were very basic, but it suits what a ninja would be. You want to be concealed. You don't want to have anything, any kind of flair to your suit. You just want to be, hidden as best as you can. So it works really well. And even Ninjor's helmet is also pretty unique on his own. The only complaint that I have from the Alien Ranger helmets is that they're kind of very similar to each other. Now, in most cases, the visors are reflected to either the animals that the Rangers control or various shapes and designs they use. But in Alien Ranger's case, the visors are pretty much very uniform. Yeah, they do have some slight differences, but for the most part, they're pretty much regular rectangular shaped. I guess it also does work in that simplistic case, like it's just functionality versus form. You have to get a job done, that's it. You have to assassinate a target, sneak on a target. The Alien Ranger suits do make perfect sense.
Galaxy Rangers.
Now, this one probably most people won't agree with, but I had no problems with the Lost Galaxy suits. Whether from the Charlie Brown stuff to the actual helmets, I really enjoyed the Lost Galaxy helmets. In a lot of cases, whenever they do the animal motifs in Ranger seasons, they kind of tend to go overboard with the helmets where there's like a lot of detail in them. And it's just like, it tends to be distracting in certain designs. Like certain helmets just are fairly distracting depending on the animal, and it's just like, I didn't particularly care for that one. While Lost Galaxy ones, I think they hit a perfect balance between, oh, I know you're the lion, you're the condor, you're the gorilla. And I think also in general, the visors for Lost Galaxy helmets were much more larger than usual, so I think that's what made them more interesting.
Lightspeed Rangers.
Now we're getting into the more detailed, more functional, more cooler looking helmets that I really enjoyed, and we'll start off with Lightspeed Rescue. For all the complaints that the Lightspeed suits get because of the whole candy look, I think the helmets are very well designed. Yes, they reflect the basic shapes of the Rangers' emblems and whatnot, and of course, since the team is like rescue based, they do reflect various different types of rescue forms from police officers, firefighters, etc., etc. Not only that, there's two other reasons why I really like the helmets. They have the respirators built in, which makes perfect sense, and I thought that was a really cool detail. And frankly, all the Ranger suits should have respirators built in because, yeah, I know logically in universe, Rangers are protected in general, so we assume their helmets would be equally the same. But in most cases, just like, wouldn't having, backup oxygen just in case certain situations would make more sense. And it's really not common in Power Rangers to do it. So I thought that little extra detail of having the respirators was really nice. Second, the Lightspeed Rescue visors are probably the largest visors they ever did. Now, I could be wrong. It might be Dino Charge's visors, but Lightspeed has so much visible area that you would never have any problems looking throughout in the helmet. Probably all the stunt performers for Lightspeed Rescue probably love those helmets because it would have been so much easier for them to see. However, because there's no lips and it's such a large visor, if they ever wanted to put those, extra breathing holes, they didn't have really any place to put them, so that might have made it a little bit more difficult for them to do fight scenes.
SPD Rangers.
Now we're getting into the cool helmets. And I really love the SPD helmets because one, again, since it's police-based, cop-based, the helmets really make you feel like the helmets are like all sleek and cool. But they kind of also make you think of like everyone's kind of like a dog in general because the eyes swoop back for the visors. One thing about SPD is they really love to showcase numbers because I think it was the first time they had like, you know, so many Rangers on a team. They wanted to showcase numbers, so like no matter where you look, there's always a number somewhere, whether from their big number on their chests. If you look at the top part of the visors, it showcases the designs of their Zord's cockpit, but it also shows you the number of position there is as well. Each Ranger actually has the same amount of windows to their number. Also, the helmets have secondary features like the emergency lights that can help signal people and just in case, or whenever they're just doing their roll call, but as well as they secretly actually have the SWAT mode enhancement parts built into their helmet as well. From looks to practical functions, it's a really great helmet.
Overdrive Rangers.
Ironically, one of the seasons that I hate, Operation Overdrive, I always thought it was the best helmets that they ever made because of just the pure design. It was kind of funny because if you look at Time Force and you look at Overdrive's helmets, Overdrive kind of looks more futuristic than Time Force. It was just the way they did it. Because, again, the season was, you know, focusing on a lot of vehicles, and a lot of them are, you know, high-speed vehicles, strong vehicles. They wanted to feel the Rangers to be, like, fast and sleek. So they kind of went in that direction of, like, maybe the Ranger suits could have been, like, the equivalent of, say, like a Rolls Royce. A very expensive car, Bugatti, things like that. I love the different shapes of the visors. They also added in some practicality to the helmets. They had those, you know, the lights. And Mercury Ranger's suit was, since it was more focused on like firefighting aspect, his suit actually had a lot of additional stuff, like more lights. The thing that I also really love is they actually built in the morph sequence to the suit because, like I said, the suits in general were really slick in design. So the way the suits actually power on and power off, they actually have these like neon energy beams that form the suits up around the Ranger. So I really like that aspect. Like every element of the suits was kind of like, let's make them as cool, futuristic, and sexy looking. It's a shame because I really love those suits, but I really hated the season. It's that really high contrast between the two sides. You know, I think Power Ranger designs in general can be a hit and miss for a lot of people. For me, you know, it doesn't really bug me as much. Yeah, we're used to seeing that weird zigzag from Charlie Brown, so it's like you just can never not see it for the Lost Galaxy suits. And there are some suits that I don't really care for as much, like, you know, Wild Force in general. Like, all the stripes and stuff I never really cared for. Their helmets, again, you know, traditional, you know, animal motif. And, you know, like I said before, I was really surprised of how many people hated the whole lip thing. To me, that never bothered me. It's like, at the end of the day, you know, Power Rangers are supposed to be like people-like, so that's the reason why they put the lips on there, to try to remind you, like, oh yeah, there's a person behind that mask, and that's why it's there. In Dino Charge's case, like, whenever they did the in-cockpit power-ups, they removed the mouth area completely, so it's just this black void of nothing, so that kind of gives it a cool look. But for this one was a tough one. So what do you guys think? You know, what are your favorite helmets, and like what particular design do you like from helmets? Do you like it when like the suit designers sneak in little details here and there? Like, for example, Dino Thunder's helmets, I think it's Overdrive Killer's helmet has the same shape from the Ava Ranger logo, for example. They've done things like that. Or do you like the whole aspect of like referencing a theme? Like, for example, the Gokaiger / Super Megaforce helmets, their visors are shaped with like, you know, cuts into their eyes, like, you know, because, you know, they're supposed to be pirates, and, you know, they constantly go in battles and they fight with swords, and they would have bruises and cuts on their faces. Or do you not like the animal motif helmets because it's just like, there's so much on the helmet, it's too distracting? The saber-tooth tiger teeth go across Trini's face, for example. And if you have a suggestion or topic you'd like me to cover, leave a comment down below, and I may do it in a future video.